great-grandfather came here from probably Ukraine, somewhere over there.
Eastern Europe.
Moved to New York in the early 1800s and moved to Colorado in 1885. He was a dairy farmer, and he built a dairy farm in West Denver. His farm went from Sheridan Boulevard to Wadsworth, from Colfax to 38th, 2 sections, 1,280 acres. And he farmed there till 1904 when he sold it for $5 an acre. But he dedicated about 100 acres to a tubercular hospital called the Jewish Consumptives Relief Society, where they took care of patients from all over the world, and they never paid. Then he moved into a building, and Eddie, you back me up if I miss anything. He moved into a building on Lower Colfax by Bronco Stadium. It was called, and I think it still is, Brooklyn's Restaurant. And he lived upstairs, and the dairy was downstairs. He had 2 sons.
Hyman and Morris.
2 sons. And they started a dairy at that time called Climax Dairy. And they were on 23rd and about Arapahoe, somewhere in that area.
Lawrence, actually.
And they operated that until the late 20s. And they sold it to Windsor Farm Dairies. And Windsor Farm and Beatrice and Climax sold to Beatrice same time. And our dad then started a dairy on 7th and Logan next to Governor's Park Restaurant. There was a cleaners there up a few years ago. And it was called Gold Seal, and he operated that probably for 4 or 5 years and sold it to a dairy called Carlson Frink, which is no longer in Denver.
It was located where the Auraria campus is today, right down on, it was off, what, 14th and Lawrence,
Right around 13 and Lawrence. He operated that for 3 or 4 years. When he sold it to Carlson Frink. And at that time, he stayed with them till 1947, when he and a couple of his cousins and another person bought a dairy on 26th and Larmer called Supreme, changed it to Robinson. And that's where Eddie and I started with him.
The building is still there.
Yeah, it's a building right on 26th corner of 26th and Larmer. So it's a white building covered with graffiti.
I wish we still owned it.
Eddie and I went to work there. I graduated from CSU in '51 and went into the Army. Spent 13 glorious months in Korea. Tell them what you did.
Yeah, I started working there at age 15 making ice cream. And I wanted to drive a truck, but you had to be 17 to drive a truck. And I wanted to get out of the ice cream department because I was putting on a lot of weight, sampling every flavor. But then when I was able to drive a truck, I enjoyed it immensely because I used to drive semis, and we had one semi, and I went to Lowry Air Force Base and I drove it. We enjoyed the plant. We outgrew that plant. It was way too small. We had another company bottle some of our milk because we couldn't do it all. We sold out in 1960, I think seven, to a dairy out of a company out of Omaha, Nebraska called Roberts Dairy. They had about 5 plants. And they had a dairy here they operated, which was called Stearns Dairy. Some people may remember it.
It was on the corner of Alameda and Leachdale Drive.
Down in Glendale area there. And they had only home delivery, so they wanted our company because we were wholesale. We sold mostly to food service. We had a few grocery stores, but we had hotels, restaurants, hospitals, schools. It was very good business for us because we dealt with the owners of the restaurants and so forth. My dad was probably one of the best sales people in the city. He was fantastic.
He never cared about money. He never worried about it. He never wanted. He never worked on it. But we sold the retailer, the home delivery, to Royal Crest and to Meadow Gold City Park Dairy. That was in 67 and 68. I ran it when I first there, and Eddie was number 2, and then they moved me to Omaha in the corporate office at Robertson, in which I moved there in 69. Eddie took over the whole Denver area, and I was in Omaha from 69 to 75, 6 years. I was executive vice president of the parent and president of a company called Roberts Foods, which was Denver. And in 75, Roberts was a very viable company, but they were purchased by a meat packing company called American Beef Packers, and they got in trouble and filed Chapter 11, but the dairy was fine. And 3 of us were going to buy out the whole dairy. And I said to my wife, I said, Marcia, Cal Fisher and Dick Weston and I are going to buy out the rest of the dairy. She said, Dick, I'm going back to Denver. You can come if you want to. So we decided, Eddie and I decided just to buy Denver back, and we did that in 75. And we operated it, well, for 25 years, till 99. And at that time, we sold it to a dairy called Suiza Foods, which was based originally out of Puerto Rico. And then they purchased Dean Foods, and we were part of Dean Foods from 75. They kept us on the payroll, I think, until when, 2013?
They fired us in around 2013. We sold them the business, but we kept the real estate, all the buildings, and we leased it to them for 20 years. So we still had a relationship.
But I sat on one of the boards, and Eddie was helping run Denver, talking to the new management. They just treated us very well. And we wanted to stay there because we had hospitalization and a 401k, and they were paying us. So, hey, hang out, why not? And then, as Eddie said, they fired us. We were so happy. And from that time on, we've been handling our own stuff. We have an office on Alameda and Steel, the old Daniels, where Bill Daniels was. And we're digging out of our old good deals, you know, all of our good deals that we're trying to figure out where the hell they are.
Actually, then we sold the property. When was it? About that time?
About 2017
we sold it.
Or 18, something like that.
Before COVID, it was before COVID.
So, or in 75 when we bought it back, Eddie owned half and I owned half, and we funded it with $500 each. The bank gave us all the rest of the money, which would never happen today, and the loan agreement was maybe 1.5 inches. No, maybe 1/4 of an inch.
They had one caveat. They funded the purchase of, when we went over to the building on 6th Avenue, there was one caveat: we had to get a mortgage on the building. And of course, Dick and I always said the best investment we could make is to pay off our debts. So rather than put profits in our pocket and live lavishly, we paid off all our debts, and we were debt-free.
In about 5 years.
And we invested our money in, at that time, bonds and stuff, which with companies like Ford and...
We really invested our money back in the business because it was a very capital-intensive business. We had to pay a lot of money for equipment. And I mean, not a few bucks, but millions. And in 1997 or 97, we built a new 37,000 square foot refrigerated warehouse right hooked onto the plant. And we spent maybe $5 to $6 million for that. And that was the only debt we had because we did an industrial revenue bond at 2%. Couldn't say no.
Yeah, it was in some kind of a zone where we got a good deal on it.
Yeah, we were in a place that was
Enterprise zone.
That's the story of the dairy all the way through in our family.
Never served on the same boards together. If it was, unless it was some business where they wanted the two of us, but I got involved with the Denver Zoo. Somebody hooked me up. I thought Dick and I both graduated with agricultural degrees, Bachelor of Science in Agriculture with a major in animal husbandry, dairy. And so I thought they wanted me on the zoo board because of my background. They didn't want me for that. They wanted me to help with the development.
They wanted you for your money. That's what they wanted you.
In any case, I ended up being on the board, ended up being chairman of the board. And, actually, they called it president at that time, but it's chairman. And at the same time, I was involved with I got on the National Jewish Board, but my father and a person by the name of Arthur Lorber were involved with the Children's Asthma Institute, which was originally a sheltering home, but they took care of asthma and they had research.
They never charged anyone.
Nobody paid.
Nobody ever paid for it.
In fact, our father, we liked it a lot because he spent more time there at the institution than he did at the dairy. Kind of allowed Dick and I to do our thing. But back in the mid-'60s, my dad wanted and Arthur Lorber wanted a legacy on that board. And so I joined it. Dick was on the JCRS board, the one that he mentioned at the hospital where our dairy was. And so in the mid-'70s, Children's Asthma Institute merged with National Jewish Hospital because they were doing the same research, and it worked out. A few years later, I became chairman of that board, and I'm still on it. I think I'm the oldest board member, oldest in age and the oldest in term. And then I got involved early on. My dad wanted me, our dad, wanted me to get involved with the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Denver. Eddie Hirschfeld said, you need to get involved, so I joined that board way back, and I became chairman of that eventually too. And they're all lifetime memberships, and so I got to die to get off them. I used to be on the Paramount Foundation, Paramount
Theater
downtown. You know, we grew up in Denver, 16th Street had the theaters, the Denham, no, not the Denham, the
Orpheum was down there.
Orpheum was on Welton, and then another one down, and then the Paramount and one across the street. And I used to drag race down 16th Street.
And there's streetcars
It was two
right
ways, which is now a mall.
The trolley cars would run up and down 16th.
But anyway, the Paramount Foundation had a benefit every year, and they brought people in, named people. It was kind of interesting. And then I got involved with the St. Joseph Hospital. A friend of mine was head of the foundation, and he said, Eddie, I want you on the board. And I said, I can't do it. I've got too many boards, and it may be a conflict with National Jewish, which it wasn't, because National Jewish did not have in-house patients. Everybody was outpatient. So I finally did join it, and it wasn't but a few years I was chair of that board. So, and I'm still very active. I still work with St. Joseph because they have a joint venture with National Jewish, and I do a lot of help for them. So I'm trying to slow down. And we were fortunate enough, well, I'm tired. We're fortunate enough to have people that work for us at the dairy that did a good job for us. We treated our people well, just like family. And they were very good in handling things for us. It allowed Dick and I to give back to the community. Rather than advertise on a billboard or on TV, we spent that money that would go for advertising was for our charitable giving. We had a foundation at one time. And so we felt that was very important because the community is what helped us survive and get along pretty well.
Eddie said it, we never served on the same thing. I chaired the Chamber of Commerce, Denver. I chaired the Employers Council. I chaired Rose Hospital. I chaired the CSU Governor's Board. I was on the board of Regis University. I chaired, did I mention Rose Hospital? I chaired that. And today I'm a lifetime member of Regis, a lifetime member of the Employers Council, and I'm still on the board of HCA, Hospital Corporation of America, which covers Rose and the rest of them. And I don't only go to one meeting, only one anymore, and that's HCA. I was a founding member of that whole damn thing when they came in and bought Rose and Press and Swedish and Aurora and Spalding, and we built Sky Ridge, and it's just a huge thing, and I totally enjoy that, and it's a great, well-run organization.
Yeah, the hospital's pretty well covered.
We can get sick and get taken care of anywhere. They're scared to death when we come in. But it's been an interesting life.
Well, you chaired the Boy Scouts too.
I chaired the Boy Scouts.
I chaired on the Girl Scouts Advisory Board. I had 3 daughters, so I figured I'd do that for them.
I remember the Second World War real clearly. I worked at Larry Air Force Base in the post exchange as a soda jerk at 14. And at 15, I worked for the post exchange, just driving a car making deliveries. They didn't know I was 15. They thought I had a license.
And then where'd you end up, in the Parkway on 6th Avenue?
Well, that's when in high school, I watered the parkways, starting from Colorado Boulevard to Monaco, up to 20th, and then back and every day, until I got promoted to the mower crew, and finally to the power mowers. I didn't have to push them. Oh God, I remember that. Yeah, I worked there for years, 2 years.
Dick and I had the exact same education. When we graduated CSU, he was 3 years ahead of me. And when you go to CSU, it was Colorado A&M College. It was a land grant. It is a land grant college, and you have to take ROTC for a couple of years. It was part of the curriculum.
You didn't have to. We did.
Well, I think at that time it was part of the.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
But anyway, we took it for 2 years, and if you took it for 4 years, you graduated with a commission, an officer's commission, second lieutenant, with your degree. So Dick was 3 years ahead of me. The Korean conflict was on. He went to Korea, and I graduated 3 years later in 1954, and the war, that war, or conflict as they called it, was over. And they called me to active duty and sent me to Germany.
And they sent his car with him.
Yeah, at that time they could send if I was married, I could send my household goods, my wife and everything over. So they sent my car over, and I complained a lot because we did a lot of training, but it was a good experience. I saw a lot of Europe in my early years, and I didn't appreciate it as much as I would right now.
I spent 13 months in Korea getting shot at, and my mother was more worried about him over in Germany that he'd have a car accident, which was probably true.
Well, I did have an accident on the way to the port, but I call it my graduate degree, being 2 years in the Army.
I went on the board originally of the American National Bank, which was purchased by First Interstate. And I went over to First Interstate on that board, and we were an active board, not advisory. We were actually making the decisions. And we hired a guy by the name of Bob Malone. And Bob became CEO of First Interstate, and he became my closest friend. And eventually he went over to Bank Western, which was a savings and loan, and took that over. And he called me and said, "Get your butt over here, you're gonna be on the board with me." I went on the board, I'll never forget, the stock was $1 a share. I think I bought 10,000 shares, just because I fell out, they knew I was coming. The first meeting I go there was a guy from the OTC, the office of, well, they're the ones that looked over the savings and loans. And he sat in that meeting and he went, "Every one of you directors are responsible for the failure of the bank, this bank." And I looked and I said, "You SOB, Bob, what did you do to me?" We sold that bank to we sold that bank to First Banks out of Minnesota. And I went on the board of First Banks up in Minnesota. We then bought U.S. Bank, and the bank is now called U.S. Bank Corp. And I spent 9 years on that board. And then later on, there were 7 of us. We started a small bank on First Avenue called Steel Street. We sold Steel Street to MidFirst. And then we sold Rose to HCA. That's how I got involved there. And we formed the Rose Community Foundation, which I chaired for 2 to 3 years. I just resigned from the investment committee last week there. I don't, they're ahead of me.
You're too old.
Damn right, I still think of dollars. Go ahead, Eddie.
I served, remember Central Bank at Denver? I was on that board. Central Bank was downtown there. It was a family bank originally, and I was asked to be on the board, and it was a legal board, which, as Dick said, we have responsibilities and problems. Anyway, the bank was sold to U.S. Bank, or First Banks, and it's U.S. Bank now. And later on, they bought Colorado National Bank, and I was on that board as it wasn't illegal as a legal director, but as advisory director. And that's the end of my banking experience. It was very interesting to learn about banking, but I felt I better put my efforts somewhere else because it was tough.
I failed one course in college, money and banking. And the reason was it was an 8 o'clock class that was, I didn't have to take it, I took it. It was over. And I never went to class. I read the book, and I walked in for the final, and he said, "I'm glad to see you. You're going to enjoy this quiz." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because it's strictly on my lecture, nothing in the books." I flunked it big.
it's funny, there's a church behind us, behind the dairy, and we had a way to get our trucks into the yard, you know, they unload their empty cases and cans and stuff. And the church was very kind to us because they used to come over to me and on a Sunday. Dick and I'd go down on Sundays sometimes to get orders from the Brown Palace or some of the other. And they needed to use our water for baptism or something, I don't know. And we said, whatever you need. And they always kept a space so we could turn our trucks around in that alley. They never built out, if somehow or another they didn't build a fountain.
We needed the trucks that were bringing the milk into us. We didn't use the alley for...
No, we used for the semis to get in. They had to get in.
Did we?
Yeah. I know, I drove the damn thing.
Not very well, you didn't.
No, to tell the story about the stand-up Diffco.
Oh, he's driving a stand-up. Diffcos were a retail milk delivery truck, and you could stand up and drive them. Your clutch and your brake were the same thing. Eddie's coming into the dairy, wheels in there, falls out of the truck, because the truck goes straight ahead.
I fell into the truck, and luckily I got up and I got the brake on before it slammed into something. I forgot to hold on.
He's telling how good a driver he was. He was driving the semi and backed into something at Laurie and took care of the whole back end of it.
Who did?
You!
I don't remember.
I know you don't.
I do remember Dad backing your car in the parking space. We had lots of issues. One of the reasons we went to see us to Colorado and A&M is our father wanted us to know something about the theoretical part of the business, you know, bacteriology, chemistry, and so forth. And I think I flunked chemistry once and bacteriology once, but I got out in 4 years. But it was interesting because in the milk business, you've heard of people having lactose intolerance and so forth, and one of the courses was we separated the lactose out of milk. We learned how to do that, which was interesting. But we knew all about the machinery and how to pasteurize milk and run the equipment and make ice cream and stuff like that, but we didn't know the theoretical portion of it.
We got involved too in a company called Horizon Organic. I was on the original board and one of the founders, and I did that because of a private equity firm owned a bunch, and they asked me if I'd do it, and I did, and I was there too. We sold it to Dean Foods, who had bought us, so I had to recuse myself. I couldn't get involved in the negotiation. That really upset me, but it was what it was.
I think my favorite memory is when Dick and I bought the dairy back in 1975, because I was here running it, as Dick said. He was in Omaha, but the name on the sign up there, which was still there, I don't know if it still is, was Robert's Dairy, and we had to change it back to Robinson. But that was my favorite memory, when we finalized that deal with the bank, and the bank gave us the money.
My favorite, two of them. First one was when I got married, and that's 68 years ago. And the second is when we sold the dairy, and I got that cashier's check. One point I didn't make is when we bought the dairy back, Eddie and I had a long conversation. And I said, Eddie, I ain't coming back unless I have veto power. We can't have two people that say that. And he fought me and he hollered and screamed, but we finally said, okay. And in 25 years, I never used it once. Not once. We hollered a lot at each other.
The only thing I said to him, you can have any title you want.
I wasn't title, Eddie. I didn't want a title. I wanted veto power.
Oh yeah, you never did veto, but we had to take the same amount of money out.
Didn't argue on that.
Everything, we trusted each other wholeheartedly in business.
We could share boards because we had a guy who was our general manager whose name was Kelly Stickle, S-T-I-C-K-E-L. We worked together at Roberts in Omaha. He was just out of college. And then we had a plant in state of Washington that he ran, a whey plant, dry whey. And when we bought this back, he came to see me. He said, "I'd like to go to work for you." And we hired him. And I'll tell you what was the best thing we ever did in our lives. We sold on a Monday, and on a Tuesday he went to Arizona, and they never saw him again. The thing that makes me feel the best is that there's a dairy called Royal Crest, and there are now 12 of our people that worked for us for years that are over there. They're running it, and it just tickles me.
Which were trained in our company.
One was there for 24 years. One was with us the whole time. He's our sales manager now. The controller was Garrett Callister. He's now running the thing. He's the CEO. Our distribution head, whose name happened to be Robinson. The distribution manager, the credit person, who I would never want to owe money to. She was the toughest lady I ever met in my life.
There are a lot of favorite memories. You live so long. When you live 92 years, it's hard to put everything together. Of course, he's 2.5 years ahead of me, but we've been fortunate. Our customers have been very kind to us in business, and our people that lend us money were very kind to us, still around, and it's been a good ride.
I was the first chair of the milk processors education program, which was the milk mustaches.
Got milk.
Got milk, appointed by the Secretary of Agriculture. And I was the first chairman. In fact, in my office, I got a milk can they decorated for me when I went out, but I was there for this chair for the first 3 years of it. And what we would do, we'd assess every dairy in the country 20 cents a hundredweight on bottled milk, whether it be skim, whole milk, 2%, whatever. No creams, none of that. And we'd raise about $115 million a year out of that. And we'd go to these athletes and movie stars and bring them in. And Annie Leibovitz, who was our photographer, you know who she was, yeah. And in fact, she took a picture of me with my milk bus. I can't find it. I wish I could.
I got one in the office.
Yeah. We pay the athletes $25,000 each and the movie stars to do it. Annie, we'd pay $150,000 each for each picture. She was rather expensive, but she was good. That's still in existence. My grandfather married a woman whose maiden name was Miller. And she died at childbirth with my dad, who was born on the corner of Colfax and Pierce at the farm at that time in 1900. So we're related to the Millers. And they are like, they populated a lot better than the Robinsons. They really did. Because that family is really something. They were cattle feeders, and they had a 100,000-acre ranch in Wyoming. They owned Montbello. They had that was their feedlot. They developed it, so there's a lot of interest there.
Our father was an amateur photographer, and he would go downtown and just take pictures of all the buildings. He was just amazed at it, because he was born in 1900. He grew up there, of course, and he was amazed at the structures of these new buildings.
All his pictures are at DU. He gave it to, oh, thank God, because we didn't want to fool around with the 16mm movies, and he had a big old box. What kind of camera was that? It was
Ellen Howell?
well, that was the movie camera, but and he had a blue movie camera too.
Yeah. But he would take pictures, and they had him. Gene Hamel was on the program. Do you remember him? And he had Dad up there interviewing him. We've got a movie. We've got the tape of it. And,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
I've got it somewhere. I used to have all this stuff in my basement.
He's got a picture of a house on Colorado Boulevard in Cherokee Drive going into the water during that flood back in the 30s. That big smokestack they had out there that they tore down, he's got a picture that he took.
I was with them there. They had to blow the smokestack down. They imploded it. I fell asleep in the car. They had to wait for hours for to do the dang thing.
Our father did something that I'll never forget. When my mother died, he'd have breakfast every morning at the Brown Palace. And the doorman was named Curtis, and he took great care of Dad. He took care of the car and parked it. And Larry somebody, I can't remember his last name, was running the Hilton down the block. He called and said, "Sam, come over for breakfast." Dad said, "I'd love to." So Dad drives up, gets out of the car, and said, to the guy, "Will you take my car?" The guy said, "Yes, sir." 2 problems. 1, they never had a doorman at the Hilton. And 2, we didn't see the car for 8 weeks. He calls me, he said, "You won't believe this." And I said, "You're right." He said, "What do you mean I'm right?" "I don't believe it."
Just take my car. We kept the politics, he being a Republican, and his wife's a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat, my wife's a Republican, so it cancels. But we kept it mainly for business. We didn't want to offend anybody. You know, if we gave to the Republican Party, we also gave to the Democratic candidates.
You.
Huh?
You gave to the Democrats. I never gave. Oh, I did give this a couple.
I gave to Republicans. I told them I'm not a diehard Democrat. Probably should be. I wanted to be an independent, and Dick said, "You don't want to do that. Stay with it."
I was with the good ones, Bush and 2 Bushes, Reagan.
I registered at age 20. I think you had to be 21 to vote early on because Roosevelt and Truman were in office and everybody was a Democrat, so I registered as a Democrat. No, the president, who?
Clinton?
Clinton. I couldn't remember. I was invited to his inauguration. I have one with Reagan, who I liked, but I think he was out of it at the time when he was taking the picture.
I never thought about this, but when I was at AMC, American Medical Center, we merged and we became the Eleanor Roosevelt Institute for Cancer Research. And I was on that board, and Jimmy Roosevelt was the chair. And I'll never forget, we met at Hyde Park with Eleanor Roosevelt when John F. Kennedy was inaugurated. I went to his inauguration, treated like I was somebody. I was 20-some or maybe 30 years old. I wasn't very old. That was 19, God. And now we've invested in a lot of different things, and they've been good and some have been bad, but basically we're plus, which is good. And I got a call from Roy Romer, who was our governor, who was also a classmate of mine at CSU, but we had one little problem. I chaired Bruce Benson's run against him for governor. We got our rear ends bounced. I think we're the only Republicans in the country that lost that year. Roy said, "I want you to chair a committee to go out and get ownership for a baseball team." I said, "Okay." I said, "How much time have I got?" He said, "You got to raise $90 million in 2 weeks." I said, huh? And he said, you heard me. Go to work. You can't talk to me anymore. You don't have time. And we did. We raised Kenny Montfort, who was Dick's father, was a classmate of mine too. He and Roy were close friends, but they split up later. I called, I'll never forget, I called Kenny. I said, Kenny, you guys got to get involved in this thing. He said, Dick, I'll call you back. Calls me back about a week later, no, about 4 days later. He says, Charlie and Dick and I got together. I spent 40 minutes telling what a terrible deal this was. Dick took the next 30 minutes and says it's the worst thing he's ever seen. Charlie said, have him call me. And we did, and they were a major investor in the team. Plus Jerry McMorris and Orrin Benton, Coors did some, Kerry Taraji, I can go down the names, I still remember them. And we raised $90 million. And we met, this is hysterical, we met at the Westin Hotel down in a suite up on the top floor. And the last day we had to get together. So we went into the bathroom, put Roy on the stool, and we were all standing around there. And I found a guy in New York who had 30 million he was ready to invest. I got it through a lawyer at Home Roberts. It was Paul Jacobson, Danny Hoffman, Steve Kurtz. They were, and Roy said to me, what do you know about this guy? I said, just one thing. He said, what's that? He's got $30 million, that's it. He put the money in, and it ended up to be that Mickey Monas money, and he went to jail. But we got the team formed, and we did all right. Yeah,
and we didn't invest in the team.
Thank God. No, it would have been good. The investment in that team is great. The team is not great.
We're season ticket holders.
What's your number?
23. Priority numbers. No, it's 22 now.
No. And also, Pat Bolin called us, and we chaired the committee for the building of the new stadium, the finance committee.
So they asked Dick and I to chair the finance committee of the new stadium.
We did very little, but we got the money.
And we had the pick of a suite.
We had a suite on the 40-yard line, a small one, because we didn't want a big one. We couldn't. Small ones were 150K all total, and we had 20 seats. The ones next to us were 35, 40 seats. We were 2 down from Bolin, and Charlie Gallagher was one over on the other side of Bolin.
We've received a lot of awards in our lifetime.
Citizen of the West.
Yes, I think that's probably it. They did a magnificent job in honoring us, but we're with a lot of people that got that award. More popular than we are.
That's a problem. I can remember numbers. I have trouble with names.
Well, Dad did too, so it must be a hereditary feature. He'd introduce me to somebody. He said, "This is my son Eddie," but he never told me the person's name that I was being introduced to.
It was a good life for us. We've had we've both been here a long time. If I'd known I was going to be here this long, I'd have taken a lot better care of myself.